volume.
We could blow this place apart if we wanted to.
The speed, the intensity.
Sticking your finger in a socket, you know?
Punk is whatever you want to make it.
Punk rock is definitely about breaking.
I want to break chairs. I want to smash furniture.
I want to shake the juice till it burns. I love your juice.
The attitude was generated by the music.
We're born punks and we'll die punk.
If you're miserable enough to watch and listen to this report on punk,
You, because I'm a punk rock.
It was angry, chaotic, and rebellious. Stripped down, offensive, and sometimes violent. It was an anti-movement.
It's kind of an instinctual reaction to the things that oppress you.
A rock revolution begun the old-fashioned way. With blood, spit, guts, and loud, fast songs on guitars some could barely play.
How much did you guys rehearse for this show?
Nothing at all. We haven't played in a month.
Punk started as an attack on the soft and sensitive hippie culture.
All those hippies.
Only people you could rely on were your other punk friends, and everyone else could just like...
And it turned into an all-out audio assault on overproduced corporate rock of the 70s.
Toto and Kansas and Foreigner and all that crap.
A quarter century after the Ramones released their earth-shaking debut album,
Well, we're playing this as modern, and it's the future of rock and roll.
the punk tradition lives on. VH1 and Spin magazine look back at the power, freedom, and legacy of the punk rock revolution. Next on VH1 All Access, 25 years of punk. In the late 60s, many young people in America still believed peace and love could solve the world's problems. Not everybody was buying it.
we made lousy hippies. You know, we liked cheeseburgers, we liked TV. We didn't like earth shoes and bell bottoms.
The whole music part of the hippie thing was this overindulgence.
The hippies ruined everything.
In a dark corner of Manhattan's Lower East Side, things were changing. The Velvets were writing songs about previously taboo topics.
It's amazing to think, at the same time that the Beatles are singing I Want to Hold Your Hand, the Velvets come out with heroin.
Test your video smarts on Name That Video, VH1's new game show.
Lou Reed
Up next,
wrote a
only
song
on
about
VH1.
heroin that's as beautiful as any love song ever written.
I think they were one of the first bands to actually say, hey, why don't we put adult themes in rock and roll?
I think that the Velvet Underground probably started it off by creating the notion of underground rock music.
In Detroit, a band of unemployed working-class kids had their own brash reaction to flower power. The NC5 mixed left-wing politics with a down-and-dirty brand of rock. They ripped through a controversial set outside the 1968 Democratic Convention.
The MC5 was the only band to go there and perform. We knew that there was going to be a riot. We played for a lot of riots.
They were the band that said rock should be not just wild, but revolutionary.
MC5 was smoke a lot of dope and in the streets, anarchy.
Stooges on ABS.
Another group of streetwise delinquents from the Motor City, Iggy Pop and his band, the Stooges, took rock performance to chaotic extremes.
So like I say to you, kiss my ass. Here's my ass. Come and kiss it.
Their savage, unpredictable shows brought madness and mayhem center stage and out into the crowd.
The Stooges are probably the most responsible for creating a sense of sort of punk as wildness and rolling around on the floor on glass.
You suck dog turds. Kiss my butt.
And certainly Iggy started the ball rolling that killed the 60s. It was the furthest thing from what the 60s hippie sensibility was.
Go read a book and flunk a test, you.
It was just this flat-out, violent, sexual, genius band. They did not treat the music kindly.
I got cut, and I didn't notice it. I just kept singing along, and the more I sang and the more I moved, the more the blood pumped, and I looked down, and I was covered in blood, and
Whatever Iggy did, he'd fall off the stage and break his neck, and the band never stopped playing.
Defiant rock and roll was catching on. Dressed in high heels and lipstick, the New York Dolls began strutting the city's downtown streets in 1971. They couldn't play, but they sure looked good.
It was a new thing for men to be making themselves look so gorgeous. You know, hippies, they kind of let everything kind of grow out and be natural, but the Dolls kind of styled their hair and wore makeup.
They were kind of like these tough kids that were dressed in drag. I always thought that that was the most unique thing about them, was that they never came off as being feminine.
We got something to say, which is, anybody who's something to say can get honey, because we're out here bugging every night.
They were almost musically the band that never got out of the garage.
I suddenly realized they're so bad, they're really good at being bad.
Well, you know, the Dolls, we like to think that we single-handedly lowered the standards of the entire industry.
Bands saw them and they said, oh, hey, it can be done. Look, people love them and they stink.
Inspired by the Dolls, a budding underground movement began to emerge at clubs like Mercer Arts Center, Electric Circus, and Max's Kansas City.
It's the place to be. Every night's a happy hollow day.
When we started playing, like, there wasn't really a lot of clubs to play and stuff like that. You know, we had to really open them up practically.
The New York Dolls are kicking it out.
The Dolls had their sort of moving party that went, you know, to all their shows, and it grew from that.
It was like an alternative universe of gay and straight and poets and Andy Warhol people and artists and hairdressers.
New York City nightclubs nurtured this kind of underground avant-garde rock music.
A new generation of bands was challenging what mainstream music had become.
The first wave of punk, you need to remember it in the context of where music was at that time.
Toto and Kansas and Foreigner and all that crap.
Rock and roll had really gone into this big, expensive lifestyle, taking 2 years in the studio to perfectly craft the albums that they were making.
I always was sickened by disco. You know, all that stuff just made me like sick.
Punk came along and just, you know, kicked them all in the ass. Basically, everyone just went out and said, we'll just make our own music.
Through the Velvets, the MC5, the Stooges, and the Dolls, the germs of the punk virus made their way into the atmosphere. Soon a bored, apathetic generation would be contaminated. Two distinct centers of New York City nightlife were emerging in the mid-'70s. Uptown, there was the cocaine-fueled delirium of Studio 54. Downtown, a grittier scene was unfolding. Packs of lean, hungry garage bands and poets were prowling the Lower East Side, searching for action. One of the least likely spots was a notorious bar on the Bowery called CBGB's.
It was like a slum bar, just a bar for the bums. You know, bums would come in and drink.
If punk rock is anything, it's the bathroom at CBGB.
It wasn't this exclusive scene, you know? It was just that no one else wanted us, and this is where we ended up.
CB's was great. It was like going to somebody's house. There was books there and furniture. Billy had his stuff everywhere. The dogs crapped all over the place.
Musicians who had no place to play started wandering in. Patti Smith and television came to him and said, let us play here. And they did, and they attracted a following, and so we started to do business.
Pretty soon there were lines around the block.
Television, founded by Richard Hell and Tom Verlaine, set the tone with their strange brand of stark, ironic songs. The bar quickly became a platform for such eclectic acts as Blondie, Talking Heads, and Patti Smith. Smith was a poet drawn to the freedom and expression of the downtown scene. CB's was the ideal launching pad for her boundary-pushing performances.
When we started, we were not really a rock band. There's some weird poetry happening.
I'm an artist, and I'm free because I can leap up and scream. I can put my fist up in the air. I don't give a shit. She was mesmerizing. I'd never seen anything remotely like that. Man, woman, nothing.
Watching Patti Smith, just her spits on the stage, that was punk to me.
The name of this song is Psycho Killer.
Everybody was trying hard to be different. Talking Heads, led by David Byrne, had a sardonic edge.
Psycho Killer, just the same.
They sounded totally weird.
They were playing this amazing music, but they were like college nerds, you know, art students.
CBGBs allowed all of us the free artistic expression. I mean, anything went.
Run, 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 run away.
Even the retro 60s sounds of Blondie, who were a pop band in punk clothing.
Blondie was something strange as compared to every other band in that scene.
They were probably the most pop of the bands at CB's.
It did have this sort of edge to it. We could be independent, you know, say really what we wanted.
Along with the unlikely batch of poets and musicians, some hard-edge rock rebels were boosting stage time at CBGB's. The noise was getting louder.
Here to see the Dead Boys. I'm here to see how great rock and roll is supposed to be done.
How should it be done?
With ain't no pyrotechnics, no phony showmanship, just pure rock and roll energy, pure guts, pure stamina.
The Dead Boys, I mean, if you come to my house and you want to hear punk rock, that's what I'm going to play for you.
This next number is called I Belong to the Blank Generation.
From CBGB's stage came anthems of alienation like Johnny Thunder's Born to Lose and Richard Hell's Blank Generation.
I belong to the Blank Generation.
What's a blank generation?
Me? I look blank.
I was absolutely fascinated, fixated on this guy called Richard Hell. What I liked about him was his shirt. It was purposefully torn, and his hair was very spiky. It was very odd seeing that in a bar on the Bowery.
In August '74, 4 kids from Queens in leather jackets and ripped jeans hijacked the stage at CBGB's. They called themselves the Ramones.
Hey, oh, let's go.
Sounds like 4 guys playing music.
It was just the strangest thing I ever saw.
What is this? The New York Dolls on speed?
In a scene that prided itself on its musical amateurism, the Ramones took crude sounds to a new low.
I said, you're never going to amount to anything.
Billy said, nobody's going to like you guys, but I'll have you back.
They started, stopped, couldn't play a whole song because their equipment broke down.
Now I want us to sunset. Now I want us to
The band's 2-minute 3-chord song, sophomoric lyrics, and infectious anthems spoke to a generation of bored, glue-sniffing adolescents.
How about a song like Now I Want to Sniff Some Glue? What do you want to say about that?
Now I want to have something to do. Now I want to sniff some glue.
Now I want us to sunset. Now I want to have something to do.
We had limited attention spans, and also we wanted to have fun.
Hey ho, let's go. Let's go. It was just a chant for the kids who were the outsider, freak kids who would look to a band like the Ramones.
The lyrics were so dopey that they had to be smart. If you were a moron, you could enjoy them because they were moronic. If you were smart, you could enjoy them as irony.
We wrote about things that amused us,
drug references,
things that disgusted us,
boredom,
getting at our aggression and frustrations.
First time you hear the Ramones, you think, this is silly. The second time you hear the Ramones, you think, this is awfully catchy. By the 15th time you've heard the same Ramones song, you think, I could worship this.
Why do you play so loud?
We could blow this place apart if we wanted to. We'd set up everything.
In January 1975, two fans decided to pay homage to the music they felt everyone else was ignoring.
John Holmstrom wanted to start a magazine.
We were trying to cover bands like the Ramones or the Dictators.
To get me interested, he said, and people will buy us drinks, you know, that we can drink for free. I said, why don't we call it punk?
Punk is an amateur or a beginner.
It's what I had been called all my life by my teachers and the cops. You know, you're a punk.
Suddenly the music and the scene had a name. People were slowly discovering what was happening on the Bowery.
Why are you here tonight?
We saw a bit in, I think it was New Yorker, and more or less thought was see what was happening.
It's a fascinating place, I must say.
On April 23, 1976, the Ramones released their self-titled debut album, recorded in just 2 days for a mere $6,000. It was the first public document of true punk rock.
The sound of punk was heard in its fullest for the first time when the Ramones record comes out.
We kind of decided to make the quintessential lo-fi album.
There had never been anything quite so strong and energetic. It changed the world because it was so simple, the songs were so short, they shaved off all the fat.
The punk virus would quickly spread across the Atlantic. That summer, the Ramones left to tour England, leaving behind a trail of blood, sweat, and broken guitars. If the center of New York's punk universe was the Bowery Bar CBGB's, ground zero for the explosion overseas was a small clothing boutique in London run by entrepreneur Malcolm McLaren.
Steve and myself used to frequent Malcolm's shop down the King's Road. It was one of the few shops you could go and hang out.
It had an edge, and that's what attracted all these people to this store. And people who didn't have anything to do would not move for like 6 hours. It was very hard to close the shop.
In the city, there's 1,000 things I want to say to you.
McLaren had witnessed the fury of New York punk firsthand. He returned with a plan to shock the world.
Malcolm went back to England, as he says, like Marco Polo, saying, I had this image in my mind of Richard Hell and the song Black Generation.
He didn't manage any bands or anything. We asked him if we formed a band, would he manage us?
I thought you could make trouble with them. I called them the Sex Pistols because I wanted to make them sound as if they were young, sexy assassins.
He said, write your own song, write Black Generation, write your own version of it. And that became pretty vacant.
It was quite a political time in England, you know, there was a lot of stuff going on, lots of strikes, and it was quite a depressing time.
We're at the moment in a country that is economically depressed, and when you've got 60% of the age of 18 out of work without a music that they feel can capture their imagination and inspire them to go forth, you have very little future.
There's a lot that's on simmer waiting for somebody to just express how pissed off they're feeling.
That somebody was Pistol singer Johnny Rotten, who screamed of a nation in decay and in denial.
Our music is very honest. It's the most honest thing that's been happening in the last 15 years. Nothing to beat it.
Where American bands sang of angst and alienation, the Sex Pistols put out a sneering wake-up call for anarchy.
You got to remember, when we started, there'd never been anything like that before.
Bored, out-of-work young Londoners were quickly catching on, starting bands like The Damned, The Buzzcocks, and The Slits. By the time the Ramones hit town in July 1976 to support their first album, the British punk scene was on the rise.
The kids had read about us from the English press. Because the country's small, the press is real powerful over there.
The Ramones ignited London. First, their record had already done so.
Inspired by the Ramones and the Pistols, 4 squatters living in an abandoned building formed their own band. They called themselves The Clash.
I thought, that is a way to get through the summer. If I could collect some of these people that I had shambling around with me, we could perhaps mount an attack on a stage and like actually get paid.
While the Pistols were all about being as offensive as possible, the Clash was serious about its music and its message.
The Clash were kind of like the CNN of punk back in the day. Much more serious, much more straight line.
Sex Pistols were a cool band. Clash were a great band. They were a real band.
Breaking, rocking, the hot sun, the lover.
But it was the Pistols that became the first punk band to sign with a major label, releasing a single for EMI that fall. In December, they appeared on live TV, and the world had its first run-in with the Sex Pistols.
Someone at EMI got us on this Today program.
He was placed in front of this cantankerous interviewer, you know.
What was the rude word?
I don't think he bargained for what he was getting, really.
He started, like, provoking us.
Go on, you've got another 5 seconds. Say something outrageous.
You dirty bastard. So I swore at him, and it went out live. You dirty
What a clever boy.
What a rotter.
Well, that's it for tonight.
To proper Brits everywhere, it was an outrage. The backlash began immediately when the Pistols hit the road with the Clash, the Damned, and the Heartbreakers on the Anarchy in the UK tour.
Well, the 27 dates on the Anarchy tour booked, and only 8 fulfilled. That's 2/3 pulled the plug on the gigs.
We'd pull into a place and find out that they didn't want us there.
We were public enemy number 1, I suppose.
The Anarchy tour helped popularize punk fashion, which turned traditional ideas of beauty upside down.
Teenage kids who follow punk rock are really concerned now with taking any form of clothing and making a statement with it by tearing it up, writing a slogan across it that suggests something of their own particular discontent.
Even though it seemed like sloppy old clothes you don't give a shit about, a lot of thought went into that stuff.
Using safety pin as jewelry, it's so much of what punk was about. I mean, it takes something that's very simple and very plain and finds something deeper and finds some beauty in that.
Buzz from the Anarchy tour wasn't lost on England's record labels. Suddenly there was a feeding frenzy over bands like The Clash, The Jam, The Buzzcocks, and Generation X, featuring a young singer named Billy Idol.
Most of the punk rock groups would sign up immediately to all these English companies because once they kind of got a sniff, once the Sex Pistols' first record was huge, they all wanted their own punk rock group.
They didn't really understand it, you know, but they knew something was going on and they wanted to have it.
The Sex Pistols are at the top of the charts. Things like that were pop music in Britain. It's really amazing.
It was quite amusing because you walk into Woolworths, they wouldn't even write the damn name on the boards. The number 1 spot was blank.
The Pistols used the hype to pull off their biggest publicity stunt ever. On England's most patriotic day, they managed to infuriate the entire country.
The Queen's Silver Jubilee was this international celebration of royalty and of the glamour and the history of the royal family.
I want the boat to follow her flotilla, maybe a mile behind, and we'll play our version of the anthem, God Save the Queen.
God save the Queen! The fascist regime!
That was it. We'd go on the boat, play because it was Jubilee, get a load of press down there. We didn't know we were going to get arrested.
God save the Queen! She ain't no human being!
It was just getting out of hand. We couldn't even play anywhere, you know, so we had to go abroad to play.
Unofficially banned in Britain, the Pistols prepared to open fire on the States.
I think in the States, there was all this coverage about the Sex Pistols. It was this controversy. It was this outrage.
Too many problems, so why am I here?
And then when they got here, they were these 4 snotty, zit-faced kids. And this was not going to be the downfall of Western civilization.
The band whose battle cry was no future was right on the money. 2 weeks into their U.S. tour, they self-destructed during a concert at San Francisco's Winterland Ballroom and called it quits.
It broke the band up, what can I say? You were naturally wanting to explode in the most fabulous way possible.
They were gone almost before anyone knew who they were.
The Sex Pistols were dead, and soon Sid Vicious would join them.
It seemed like the end, you know, and they had taken this lifestyle to its extreme.
The Pistols had brought punk back home to America and buried it. Through the 80s, it would stay underground, slowly worming its way across the nation. When the Sex Pistols imploded in 1978, the first wave of punk ended as abruptly as it began.
The last Pistols show remains a legend for a reason. Like everything that they did, you know, the end captured that moment as perfectly as their beginning captured the beginning moment.
Should I stay or should I go now?
Clash, England's other main punk prophets, were gaining commercial and critical momentum by fusing their righteous rage with rockabilly, jazz, and reggae.
Each record sounded different and just got better and better. You know, you hear the band evolve more than bands evolve in their entire lifetime. It was just a passing phase for this band, and they just kept on developing right to the end.
Of course, it's where some of the criticism of the Clash from the pure punk community came in, that they did start to pull from other sources and that it wasn't just hard, fast, and loud.
But all across America, hard, fast, and loud was taking over. Armies of frustrated kids were picking up on punk, waging their own underground wars against boredom and mainstream culture.
What's important through the 80s is the evolution of these regional scenes, these very localized punk scenes, and people taking punk not to hit the grand slam, but to be a band that's a rallying point for a community.
The whole thing was like, support your local scene. Don't squawk about how there's nothing going on in your city until Black Flag pulls through again, you know.
Local scenes were fueled by small, homegrown labels putting out their own music on their own terms.
After punk seemed to have died, after the Sex Pistols broke up, the Ramones didn't end up becoming big sellers. Major labels weren't that interested, and this whole network of indie labels starts.
You're able to sort of actually function independently.
It was this underground network of fanzines and tape trading.
And it got so established that you could actually sort of be a musician, be in a band,
load your own equipment,
make your own record,
get in your own van. Everyone was just doing it themselves. There really wasn't any industry to help.
LA's Black Flag constructed a punk prototype many would follow. The band toured relentlessly, spreading the hardcore message to whoever would listen.
They were the band who, by just being loud and angry, got over to people who never would have understood punk before that.
We would play shows, people would just go completely ape.
Punk resonated in LA in a very different way. You can touch that American dream out there, and you can see where it comes up short.
Bands like the Circle Jerks, Fear, and the Germs rubbed their pissed-off, bare-boned brand of LA punk in the face of anyone who could stand the feedback and the slam dancing.
We had stage diving, we had slam pits. The kids would get in the middle and it would just be like a big brawl.
There were many times that I would stop shows if someone was getting hurt. The point wasn't to hurt people. The point was to act out your aggression.
I loved Fear. So you can go die! Just hearing them berate the audience, like that to me seemed like your quintessential sort of punk rock show.
Insulting people is a good way to get their attention. And that way, we're sure they're going to be listening to what we came to play for them.
The nation's capital was also rumbling with its own distinct sound.
When I was coming up,
all eyes were on Washington, D.C. You had the Bad Brains.
Bad Brains schooled everybody.
It was like an explosion.
They were amazing.
It was an energy and a ferociousness that I don't think any band has ever reproduced in the history of music.
Not to mention 4 black guys in a predominantly white music scene.
Changed my life forever.
They're, to this day, are the best live band I've ever seen in my life.
Tremors were being felt as far away as Minneapolis with bands like The Replacements and Husker Du.
Husker Du somehow went from being this band that played really ridiculously fast, and the whole thing about hardcore is you could play as fast as you wanted to. They went from that to being the world's best rock band in something like 3 years.
San Francisco's Dead Kennedys attacked up-class values with their sharp-biting lyrics.
California Uber Alice warns of fascism in disguise.
California, Uber Alice, California,
I'm glad we're getting under their skin. We're not safe family entertainment in any way.
What kept punk so vital through the 80s was not trying to compete with the international stars, but really trying to rally locally.
In addition to these local scenes, some clearly defined punk subcultures were emerging. Minor Threat's Fast Furious song Straight Edge praised clean and sober living and inspired a budding movement.
Their contribution is kind of doing away with a bit of the self-destructive elements of punk rock, drinking beer and breaking your head open on the street.
Back in Orange County, surf and skate kids found hardcore the ideal soundtrack for their extreme lifestyles.
running white into the night, opposite sides of the street.
We just had all these kids that showed up to the shows, you know, skaters, surfers, that whole aggressive mentality. We incorporated that into what we were doing.
In stark contrast to the punk manifesto of expression and empowerment, a dark element began showing up at clubs.
There was a time when there was a lot of Nazi skinheads that were trying to make some kind of statement at a show by beating everyone around them.
Nazi imagery was nothing new. The Ramones had sung Bleach Creek Bop, and the Dead Boys, Susie Sue and Johnny Rotten all wore swastikas.
In America, I think it was always there in rock and roll, this thing that more or less meant, you know, I'm bad, I'm nasty. There's no movement, it's meaningless.
Skinheads and neo-Nazis took things much further, latching onto punk's themes of frustration and alienation and turning them into a violent reality.
I think when you take it to a movement and you say, I'm anti-Semitic, you're crossing into a place where you're not playing with the imagery anymore. Music and art and literature is trying to get you to expand. And when you're using it for racism, you're really kind of doing a disservice to your own imagination.
Why don't you tell me about the misery?
As one offshoot of punk descended into darkness, another found itself shooting up the charts. Because of the perceived unmarketability of punk, the record industry created a more radio-friendly version and called it New Wave.
When American radio stations said punk rock, we won't play that, Seymour Stein had a little brainstorm and he said, I'll call it New Wave.
This music wasn't as much punk as it was just a breath of fresh air.
It worked very well. And suddenly, just overnight, we went from being a punk band to being a new wave band. And we also got played on the radio after that.
Bands like Talking Heads, Elvis Costello, Blondie, and the Go-Go's helped bring punk's edge to the mainstream by adopting a more commercial sound. But it came at a price.
We were branded as selling out very early. I don't know, I think our aspirations started going beyond the LA punk scene.
With Blondie, I really thought they were a great band. It wasn't until they did that disco stuff that they kind of broke, you know what I mean?
The cleaned up, wholesome, you know, versions of the punk rock movement. So that just figures.
I wouldn't have said I was making 100% punk rock music, but it was the punk rock attitude that was behind the you of White Wedding.
As New Wave gained commercial ground, punk was watered down, repackaged, and fed to the masses.
cool is for sale. They have people that go out and hunt cool, and they get paid for it. Generally what happens is the minute that something people think is cool is discovered, it stops being cool. So in that sense, punk rock stopped being punk as soon as it got discovered.
But real punk wasn't dead yet. After simmering underground for nearly 15 years, it was ready to explode in the mainstream once again. In the early 90s, spandex-clad hair bands were prancing on MTV.
Hit me! I dialed 911 a long time ago.
Hip-hop was breaking through.
Gone.
And underground rock was finding new listeners.
Before anyone called anything alternative, it was college music, because the college radio stations were giving a little more exposure to music that you wouldn't necessarily hear in your local AC/DC station.
It's where the music of the 90s was born.
In 1991, Jane's Addiction frontman Perry Farrell helped spread the new sound by organizing a music festival that brought alternative rock from coast to coast.
That first Lollapalooza was not something that the record industry did. That was something that Perry Farrell did. Every kid that wasn't buying Janet Jackson records was there.
Lollapalooza featured punks like the Butthole Surfers and the Rollins Band. It was an unexpected triumph.
The industry is like, wait a minute, who are these people? And how can we sell records to them?
Major labels scrambled to sign alternative bands. And then from out of nowhere, Nirvana broke, overpowering everyone with a crushing mix of punk anguish and catchy hooks.
Nevermind knocking Michael Jackson out of #1 in 1991 is a moment you don't go back from.
They changed a lot of things. They made things a little bit more mainstream.
Suddenly, Seattle was the hippest spot on the planet.
Nirvana wasn't just the one band, there was all these other bands that happened at the same time.
People saw bands that were ugly and dirty and gross, making music that you could sing along. I don't know how the term grunge came about, but it definitely was an evolution of punk rock.
Everyone called Nirvana grunge, and I thought Nirvana was a punk band, you know.
As grunge became the next big thing, doors that had once been locked suddenly cracked wide open.
It's kind of like, this is a free-for-all. You know, anything can happen now.
Bands didn't know what to do. They didn't know if they wanted to be on a major label or what.
In 1994, old school punk, hard, fast and loud, broke through. Green Day sold 7 million copies of its major label debut, Dookie. And the Offspring's indie release, Smash, sold nearly 6 million copies. For the first time ever, punk bands had platinum records and rock star glory. It took some getting used to.
Punk rock guilt. You spend 10 years of your life loving bands for their independence and their anonymity. Then all of a sudden this band becomes enormous.
I think the Ramones and Blondie and all the people that I looked up to didn't reject success by itself. You rejected manufactured success.
But to many, rock stardom went against everything punk stood for.
There's never been a punk band that sold platinum records. Green Day is not a punk band.
A lot of things started being written about us being corporate punk, Gap punk. It can piss you off.
I fucking hate when those bands come around and say, yeah, we're a punk band, and all of a sudden, they're not a punk band. Well, f*** you. That's demeaning to me.
As 90s punk infiltrated pop culture, Madison Avenue turned its attention to those overlooked classics from the 70s. And some elder statesmen finally got their payday.
Didn't we hear the Buzzcocks in a Volkswagen commercial? That was totally appropriate.
Corporate use of the songs really impresses the hell out of people. You're in them. You're respectable.
They went out and they busted their butts for all those years.
Hopefully these guys will make a little bit of money.
Punk Punk, the rude, wild, bastard child of rock and roll, continues to shock anyone and everyone.
Punk rock lyrics come right out of the gutter.
Wow, that music is disturbing me.
We're punks.
Would you like to have a glass of wine?
That's what punk was about to me.
You must have been hatched in a sewer.
Punk is freedom.
I'm gonna scream and yell. I'm gonna chop the forest down.
Quarter century after the mutiny that shook music to its core, punk's disciples refused to let it die.
Punk rock music!
This is what I do.
There's always going to be some kid in a garage somewhere banging on his guitar. When people say punk rock is f***ing dead, what the f***, you out of your f***ing mind?
Test your video smarts on Name That Video, VH1's new game show. Up next, only on VH1.